In this presentation, we will be talking about the different products and licensing, different installation methods, some settings and options that are optimal for multi-user environments, as well as a brief introduction to the 3D experience and specifically building a community and a swim site for your DraftSight users. My name is Jonathan Lieber, and I am a senior specialist with a company called Go Engineer that is a SolidWorks VAR. And I can be reached at with any questions or comments at jlieber@goengineer.com. Now, the DraftSight product lineup essentially comes in two different options. A standalone version called DraftSight Professional and DraftSight Premium. When you purchase these on the website, you'll receive a serial number, and these are good for single user, single computer type experiences. Then we have Enterprise and Enterprise Plus. Both of these products use either the SolidWorks Network License Manager or the Dassault Systems License Server. Now, when you do this, if you're already SolidWorks users, I would opt for the SolidWorks Network License Manager because you can just simply enter the new serial number into that license manager and you can be up and running in no time. If you're not, you get to choose which one you want to use, but when you purchase the software through your reseller, you'll want to make sure that they know what license manager you want to use. Of course, there's also the 3D Experience DraftSight. This is a full product that is tied into the 3D Experience platform that will give you some additional key benefits to include things like project management. Now, when we're talking about the portfolio itself, essentially the DraftSight Professional or DraftSight Enterprise is going to include all the essential 2D drafting tools. And what we're talking about there is your drawing tools, your dimensioning tools, outputs, things like smart dimensioning, power trim, APIs, list support. And then with Enterprise, you have a variety of licensing options as far as the Network License Manager from SolidWorks or the Dassault Systems one. Now, with DraftSight Premium or Enterprise Plus, you're going to get all those tools, including a bulk PDF import and some other tools or add-ins. Then with the 3D Experience DraftSight, you're going to get all the 2D and 3D tools. You're going to get all the features and functions that are typically included with what we'll say the Enterprise Plus package, but you'll also get cloud management through structured or unstructured collaboration tools, as well as project management tools, which is actually pretty cool. Now, when you go to install DraftSight, you're going to want to get the license manager of your preference. Now, to get that license manager for the SolidWorks Network License Manager, you're going to want to go to the SolidWorks website, create a login, and then download that from the SolidWorks download site. Now, what's going to be a little confusing is you won't see something that says download the SolidWorks Network License Manager. Let's actually just go there and take a look real quick. So if I come in here and go to the SolidWorks website, you're going to select this SolidWorks products. And that will download something called the SolidWorks Installation Manager. And then in the Installation Manager, you're going to have an option for server products, and then you'll select the SolidWorks Network License Manager. If all you're going to be doing is installing the License Manager, that's all you have to select. If you have other tools that you'll be installing, you can select those as necessary. However, the thing is you're going to want to install that License Manager on a computer that's going to be accessible to all your users through the network, as well as something that's going to be on all the time. Typically, people use a server that's located within the company. It doesn't actually have to be Windows Server. It just has to be a computer that's running Windows that will be on all the time and everyone has access to. Now, if you're going to go down the Dassault Systems Light Server, you're going to want to go to the 3D Experience and V6 download site, which is just simply software.3ds.com. You'll create a login just like we did on the SolidWorks website, and then you'll be able to download the Dassault Systems License Server here. You just click on this button right there. Once you get that done, you will install your license managers, type in your serial numbers, and you'll be good to go. If you're doing individual installations, you can skip this step, and you're just going to want to go to DraftSight.com/download. When you download DraftSight, you're going to get an executable file. You'll just simply run that, and then right here you'll see you'll have four options. You can do a 30-day trial. If you're doing standard, professional, or premium, you'll type in your individual serial number here. If you're doing Enterprise or Enterprise Plus, You're going to select the appropriate license manager. You're going to select one of those two, and it's going to ask you for a port name. Right here I have an example. One cool thing is it will typically tell you the port numbers that you need to know, and kind of the format's going to be port number, and then the computer name. But right here for just ease of use, I've put those in here. For SolidWorks, 25734. For Dassault Systems, it's 4084. So you'll select that, and then you'll hit next. It will go through the install. Once it's installed and you run it for the first time, it's going to want to run this migration assistance if you had DraftSight installed on the system before. And typically this is something that we'll use when we're going from one version to the next version, for example, and you've got a whole bunch of customizations. This will allow you to migrate those customizations from your previous installation to the new installation. So in here you can select your different profiles. You can do the active profile or select select all profiles, and then in those profiles it will allow you to actually select what you want to import. So user interface changes, your aliases. That's where, like in AutoCAD, for example, you may have a certain keyboard shortcut that you like to use that may be different inside of just DraftSight. But what we do is we have an alias file, and we have basically the AutoCAD command, and that links it to the appropriate DraftSight command. That's what the alias files does there. And then your drawing support folders, system folders, any print styles that you've set up, and then preferences and command variables. Okay? So once you download and install DraftSight, what do we do next? Well, that really kind of depends, because I want to talk about this here really quick. Because one of the biggest questions that come up is, hey, we need to install DraftSight on 10 computers, 100 computers, 500 computers. Whatever the case may be, you may not want to have to go to each one of those computers and download and install. So DraftSight has created what's called the DraftSight Deployment Wizard, and you can get that by requesting it from your reseller. So you could call us here, Go Engineer, for example, if you bought it from us, and we could provide this to you. Now, ultimately, what this will allow you to do, this is the DraftSight Deployment Wizard right here. This is the actual application. You're going to come here to your deployment options, and the first thing it's going to ask you for is, where is the installation media? So I could go to Browse and simply browse to where that is installed. Now, this isn't my installation, but I'm just going to simply select this file and say, hey, this is the one I want you to use. Now, it recognizes this is not a DraftSight download. Would you like to continue using it? Yes. That's just because I'm not selecting the right file. But this one here is where what's key. This is going to be a shared folder on your network drive. Now, if you're installing it from the computer that's going to act as essentially your server, you can just point to a local drive. If you're at your individual computer, you want to point this to a drive that's on your network that everyone has access to. Okay? So in this particular case, I'm just going to point it to another folder. So I'm going to say, you know what, let's put it here into my CircuitWorks folder. And it says, hey, that's not a network share. Do you want to continue using it? Yes. Okay? So you're going to basically say where the installer files are and where you want to create this deployment set of files. And then this third one option right here is where on the individual computers do you want DraftSight to be installed. The default is under Program Files, Dassault Systems, DraftSight, and a version number, or you can specify a specific location on the individual computers. Once you do that, you're going to go to the server setup, and this is ultimately is just looking for what license server you're using, SolidWorks Network license, the Dassault Systems license server, and then what is the server name and port number. If you remember, this is the same port that I typed in on the previous PowerPoint. If I select Dassault Systems, it's going to automatically know, but sometimes we make changes to these and we need to change it back to the defaults. That's why I put it on the slide. But you'll just simply select your license server, type in the name of the computer, then you hit next. In this particular case, it's going to make me type something, so I'm just going to use localhost. And then we'll click on next, and it says, okay, I've got all the information I need, and if I were to click finish, it would then basically do a special installation on that network share, and more specifically, it's going to create a install package or executable that you can then shoot out through Profiles, Active Directory, or just simply send an email or a Teams message out They'll click on the link and then it will install DraftSight to their computers. And the coolest thing about this is it will already have the license server information, so the individual users won't have to type in that information. When it installs, that information will be there for them. All right, so let's get back here to our PowerPoint. This is the DraftSight deployment wizard. It's great for installing DraftSight on multiple computers. All right, so the next step here is talking about customization. Now, specifically what I'm talking about here isn't for individual users, though you can absolutely do this. But this is for those companies that actually have multiple users. And the reason why this is important or critical is we want our DraftSight users to be using the same templates, the same blocks, the same font heights, whatever the case may be. We want them to all be doing their drawings similar. So we're basically setting up standards. So we can put all this information, again, on a shared folder somewhere on the network, and that way everyone's computer will have access to that. Right now, we're just going to be talking about where are these files located and what are some best practices. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you go to the DraftSight options. So you're just going to start DraftSight, click on the little icon on the top left-hand corner, then click on options in the bottom right-hand corner. It's going to bring you to this guy right here. This is the options, and the first set of options is the file locations. Where does it find things? So when we're creating drawing sheets, when we're opening and saving files, where's the default locations going to be? Now, what I want to share with you here is when you install DraftSight that first time on your local computer, it's going to create all these directories, and you'll see here there's going to be an examples directory that's going to have some DWG examples. And what you can actually do is you can just go into these directories and copy these files from your first installation, for example, and put them onto a network drive, and then go in here to your file locations and just simply point these from being pointing to your C drive or your local computer to that network drive. And one of the fun things you can do on that network drive is you can set up file permissions. So you can say, hey, you know what, we're going to give everyone access to this directory, but only certain people will have write access to that directory. And that way you can kind of keep these standards in a pristine condition. If you don't want everyone being able to go in and make changes to the title blocks, for example, we can set up where to find the drawing files or where to find the standards for drawing sheet creation. Make that read-only to everyone, but we'll call it your librarian. And then the librarian will be able to make changes, but if somebody else tries to make changes and save it, they're going to get a message saying you don't have right permission to that. So what you're going to want to do here is ultimately look at all these different locations. You notice there's only a couple locations, basically program files to show systems DraftSight, and then there's some stuff under this app data roaming. So you'll want to copy that stuff over to your network drive. The next place that's super important is the interface. Okay, so it's still under file locations, but you're going to want to close out the drawing support and go to the interface, and you're going to get to the alias file. This is super, super helpful. If you have individual users that have their preferred way of typing out commands, you can leave these on the individual computers, or you can point them to, again, a single location, and then everyone has access to the same set of commands. At this point, it's really kind of personal preference. All right, custom icon locations. This is when you go in and you start customizing the interface or adding your own commands in. Where can I find where can the application find icons? So when you create your own command and add it to the ribbon or menu, it can have an icon. So where are those icons located? And then this one right here, this customization file. This again is going to be one of those things where you have to make a decision as to whether or not everyone's interface, how they interact with DraftSight, is going to be the same, or if they can individually customize those. There's not really a right way or a wrong way to do it. It's just going to be your personal preferences. And then again, same thing for the menus. If you choose to use menus versus the ribbon, the menu configurations are going to be stored under the individual users, or you can put it on the network drive and say everyone has the same interface. But after we look at the application stuff, we have our DraftSight profiles. Now, in the file locations, that's where those first two screens came from. All the way down here is profiles. if you want, excuse me, if you want everyone to be using the same configurations, whether we're talking about the file locations, the interface locations, menu customizations, any of that kind of fun stuff, you can actually set those up as profiles and say, okay, in my example, when I install DraftSight, I make a few modifications, not many, and I have what's called the Go Engineer Basic profile. But when I'm doing the training classes, I need to make sure that my DraftSight is basically pristine from an install basis, so with no customizations. So when we start the training, everyone's on the same slate. So for each training I have a training set up for DraftSight 2020, and I have a DraftSight 2021 here. And then what I need to do now is I need to create a new one. So I actually come in here and say add, and then call it training-2022. And I can set up my interface however I want, my menus, file locations, whatever. And then what's really cool here is I can actually export these. So if I have a certain setup that I like, and one of my coworkers is like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. How do you set that up? I can say, you know what, we don't have to go over that. I can just export my settings and then send them the file, and then they can import that, and their system will be like my system. What's really nice is what I like to do is when I install a fresh, clean version of DraftSight, I will simply bring that in, click on Add, give it a name, maybe DraftSight Fresh Install, and then export that and put it on the network drive. And then anytime anybody goes in and starts messing with the menus or whatever the case may be, and they just make a complete mess of it, on the network drive or wherever you store it is a pristine version of the out-of-the-box install, and then you can just import that, and it will reset everything, and you'll be good to go. So, excuse me, there is a reset button right here. This resets the current or active profile. So technically, this should get you the same thing as my basically DraftSight default install, but there may be situations where you've just customized a few pieces, and you only want those pieces to be reset. You can actually hit reset. That will reset the whole system back to its install, and then import just the basic install with the few modifications, for example. So there's a lot of different scenarios where having the reset button is super useful, but also creating custom profiles is spectacular, because you can set it up so they say, hey, you know what, I'm working in 3D today, I want a 3D profile. So you can create these individual profiles. But these are your DraftSight profiles. And then again, like I was mentioning, you have your application file locations, which is basically customizations of the user interface, and then your drawing support that's going to set up for when you say, I want to create a new drawing, where is it finding the templates? I want to insert blocks, where is it going to look for those blocks, type of thing. All right, so just a couple more slides here for the presentation. Last piece here is 3D experience, what I refer to as the administrative task. So this isn't going in and setting up users or anything like that, but what I like to do when I'm working with the 3D experience is create what we call a collaborative space. Now this is a space where you can store files. This is going to be like, you can just say this is my DraftSight collaborative space, and that's where you have any permissions, the users, who can actually go in there, what can they see, and then when we're talking about creating a community, you'll hear us use the term swim all the time. Now, it's not swim like swimming in the pool or something like that, but what this is talking about is essentially creating a DraftSight community within your company's 3D experience platform or tenant. And the last thing I want to talk about here is attributes. So when we're actually checking in our DWG files that we've created inside of DraftSight, we may want to have specific attributes such as drawn by, date created, customer information, whatever the case may be. You'll want to set up those attributes for your DWG file. So let's go back here into my web browser, and let's look at the 3D experience platform here. Now, you will have to be a platform administrator to be able to get this, or what they'll call a platform manager. But essentially right here, you'll go to your collaborative spaces and control center, click on that, and you'll get two sets of options or panels here. The first one is to create a new collaborative space. You'll just simply click on that, say who the owner is, give it a title, description, the family, is it design or just standard files? I always do design because I'm CAD, I'm designing things. And then visibility. We have basically two options, private or protected, and then public. Okay? Now the private and protected, what this simply means is members can see this community. Okay? And then protected, members can see it, but only when they are released or obsolete. Excuse me, members will always see stuff. People outside of this community that aren't specifically members of the community will be able to see this stuff or when it gets released. So if you create a DWG, you're working on it, it's in design, they won't see those in design stuff if it's protected. And then public just means everything's going to be publicly available. Now we're not talking about public to the world, we're talking public to your company. All right, so once you create your collaborative space, we can then come over here to the right hand side and we can look for the attributes. So right down here, we have attributes. One of the things I can do here is just simply hit, I'm already in the attribute management here, so let me go back here. Once you get into the attributes, you go up here to attributes management, and then you're going to come down here to your drawing files. Now it's alphabetical, but you can come down here to the drawing files, or you can simply type drawing. There's the drawing. And then you can add your own attributes. So here you'll see I've got a couple in my community, drawing number, mech number, NC, descriptions. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at what can I actually kind of pull from the DWG file versus stuff that I'm going to add in the platform. But you're going to just simply click Add Attribute, give it a name, a title, if there's a default value, if it's a something that's going to have a unit, you can actually specify units. Is it required? Do they have to insert that stuff? Authorize values, and your 6W keyword tags. But that's what you're going to do here in the collaborative spaces. You're going to create your space, and then you can work with the attributes for that space. And then the Community Control Center, this is where we're talking about swim. So what we're going to do here is we can go in and say, I want to create a community. You're going to give it a name, a description, who owns it, and then once you create the community, you can then manage that community by going here to Manage Community, and you can add people, remove people as necessary, whatever the case may be. So you can see we've got a whole bunch of stuff in here, but I have a DraftSight community right here that I work with. So here I can see who's a member. If I want to add members, I can just simply click on Add Member, type that in. What's really cool is when you're doing stuff like this, if you're going to have a group of people that are in multiple communities, you can actually export this. And then when you're creating a new community, you can just simply import the export. That makes sense. Import what you exported from a previous community. You can actually see statistics about this, like how many files are in there, number of users, media type, and then of course there's the settings where you can modify the description, the name. You can actually add an icon to it, which is simply a picture. So you have something that's unique to your community, and you're good to go. So ultimately, if you're doing DraftSight, you're going to have the DraftSight Professional and Premium, which are essentially individual users. And then you'll just simply go and download and install DraftSight, give it your serial number, you're off and running. If you're doing Enterprise or Enterprise Plus, you are going to want to do that Network License Manager first, and then install your DraftSight. And then for setting up DraftSight, whether you're individual users, but more specific to corporations or companies that are multi-user, where do we want to store things like our company templates, title blocks, blocks that we're going to use in drawings, dynamic blocks, where is all that fun stuff going to go? We'll put it on a network drive, maybe even make that read-only. One of the cool things about 3D Experience is not only do you get that capability as far as creating communities, which would essentially be like your network drive, where you can store your files, but more specifically, you can set up these swim for communities for having discussions, submitting ideas, taking polls, whatever the case may be. But you can actually even set up tasks and all that kind of fun stuff in the 3D Experience. So again, my name's John Lieber. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on the 3D Experience platform or shoot me an email. Hope to see you soon.